Pokemon 151 is set to release in English in the next week, and I want to take a look at some of the cards that I think will define the metagame going forward. So let's take a look at my top 5, but before we do, we definitely have some honorable mentions. Coming in for some honorable mentions, we definitely have to talk about the 70 HP Charmander and the Fire-type Charizard EX. Now, I don't quite think anyone's going to potentially play the Charizard EX, as the Dark Terra-type one is significantly better, but that 70 HP on that Charmander makes one of the worst matchups, Lost Zone Box, a lot better for Charizard EX going forward. In addition to that, you also gain the Moltres down below, and Articuno also shares the same ability. If it has the energy that corresponds to this type, it has no retreat cost. But the Moltres is similar to the older Galarian Articuno from Evolving Skies. You can discard 2 fire energy from it and snipe 120 somewhere onto the bench. So that's another line of play potentially for the Dark Terra-type Charizard to bench this Moltres, and then go ahead and evolve, attach 3 energy to it, and then snipe 120 somewhere that you missed, as if, like, say for example, your early game pressure, you're only attacking for 180 or 210 or so on and so forth early on in the game. That 120 can round that off and close out a KO. In addition, the Articuno right beside it has a similar sort of vein. Of course, that same ability, if it has the water energy attached, it can retreat for free, but for 3 water energy, it can hit for 110 into the active, and it spreads 10 to all of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That could set up knockouts somewhere else later on down the line. Next, I want to take a look at the Venusaur EX. 340 HP. This thing is an absolute tank. And once during your turn, if it's in the active spot, you can heal 60 damage from one of your Pokemon. Pretty good. So this effectively has a lot more HP than 340. And its attack isn't that great. 2 grass and a color. It does 150, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. So technically you do 160 after the poison is in play, but we'll leave it at that. Wigglytuff EX is very interesting. On a stage 1, 250 HP. If it has a special energy attached to it, it gains 100 more HP. So there are tons of different things you can do. There is a Wigglytuff from the last few sets that also uses that recovery energy that we've had. So you can attach that to it, potentially give it an extra HP. And if you play supportive this turn, it does 90 more damage. So for 3 energy, 180, it's quite a tanky option. I don't think it'll be like a top tier deck, but I think it'd be a fun deck to play. Another card to talk about is the 50 HP Pidgey with Call for Family. Pidgeot EX has been starting to show up in a lot of different archetypes in Japan. It hasn't really seen too much success here in the Western world just yet, but I think the Call for Family Pidgey really does push that better. So you can just grab whatever basics. So say, for example, you're playing Charizard. I know we talk about Charizard all the time, but it's super popular. And it has a lot of potential. So you can use this Pidgey to grab your Charmanders and so on and so forth and establish your bench. So definitely keep an eye out for this Pidgey when you're cracking your packs 151 in the next couple weeks. Clefable EX is very interesting in the regards that it can take an additional prize card with its attack More Moon for 3 Psychic. It does 50 damage. If you take a knockout with it, you take an additional prize card. Now, here's where it's cool. We already have a Clefairy that has Moonwatching Party that can accelerate energy from the deck to bench Clefairy, so you can pivot them around and get extra energy in play. And we also did just get Clefable EX that can swing in and set up potential knockout range for this Clefable to come in and clean up. So it's a really cool surprise shocker. I think that makes that like a really cool rogue deck to play. Next is Cycling Path. And this is a really cool card. Once during either player's turn, they can discard an energy to draw 1 card. So you can discard your basic energy card, get it in the bin. So say, for example, you're playing Gardevoir EX. You want your Psychics in the discard pile. You can use this, discard a Psychic energy, draw an additional card. It's almost like a half refinement. So I can see this getting used in some different archetypes out there that want energy in the discard pile. Last honorable mention is Big Balloon. When this is attached to a Stage 2 Pokemon, it has no retreat. So it's effectively a float stone just for Stage 2 Pokemon. So keep that in mind. It's not the greatest thing ever, but I think it might potentially help some Stage 2 decks down the line. Coming in at number 5 is my starter from back in the day, Blastoise. Blastoise EX has 330 HP and the ability Solid Shell. This Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks after applying Weakness and Resistance, so effectively 360 HP. Its attack for 2 water energy, Twin Cannons, does 140 damage times the amount of basic energy, water type, that you discard from your hand. So you can do up to 280 for 2 on a massive tank of a stage 2 Pokemon. I can see this being played in multiple ways, most likely with things like Palkia V-Star, and you can also use Lake Acuity to even take less damage. 20 less plus that 30 less is 50 less. There might even be some tool cards you could potentially play. In addition, of course, Irida, as long as Irida is in the format, water Pokemon have just been feasting with the consistency that it offers. You can search your deck for a water Pokemon and an item, so you can get your Blastoise and your Rare Candy and evolve right into it off of your Squirtle. And of course, we did just get Mew EX in Paldea Evolved. Mew did take a top 8 in the Pittsburgh Regional Championships, but its ability to Shivery Chill when it's in the active spot lets you grab 2 basic water energy from your deck and put them into your hand. And of course, Hail Blade, you can just discard as many water energy you want and do 60 times the amount. So that's a bigger KO if needed. And if Blastoise can't quite get there, you could pair Blastoise with, say, Choice Belt to hit 310, or the gloves to hit 310 on Guardy or Mew EX. So there's a lot of options and potential for Blastoise EX. I think this is a solid tier 2, tier 3 deck that could enter the format. My biggest complaint, though, is the lightning weakness. Definitely makes it a little bit harder to be a relevant card. Coming in at number 4 is Dodrio with the ability Zooming Draw. Once during your turn, you can put 1 damage counter on this Pokemon. If you do, draw a card. Now, that doesn't sound that great, ultimately, but when you think about the Pokemon that you can pair this with, I think it pushes other archetypes higher up in the meta, and that's where it's worth looking at. Of course, it does have an attack ballistic break for 10 plus. It has 30 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So if it's been in play for a couple turns and it's accumulating damage on there for a single energy, you could hit some pretty solid numbers into other single price Pokemon. Or if it's been in play for quite some time, then you can definitely get extra damage onto this thing and just take big KOs. Now, I think this is going to shine in one of 2 places the most, and I think one over the other. So first we have Tyranitar EX. We've talked about this deck. There's a deck profile on the channel if you want to go check it out. I definitely mentioned Dodrio in that deck profile. Dodrio is another consistency card to help Tyranitar set up, but it also fulfills Lightning Rampage's clause of having a bench Pokemon with damage counters on it to do 100 more damage. So you can hit for 250 with Tyranitar EX and eventually clean up with Dodrio. But I think where Dodrio really shines is in Hisuian Zoroark V-Star. And this deck has always just felt like it's missing 1 or 2 pieces to be like really good. And it had a moment or two where it had a little bit of success when it came out, but Zoroark V-Star, Tick and Curse, 50 times the amount of Pokemon that you have in play that have damage counters on it. So if you have a full bench of damage counters and the active has damage on it, you're hitting for 300. Of course, you're going to use a double turbo, so you're making it 280. But of course, you can use things like Choice Belt or any of the gloves to math fix while they're still legal in play. And of course, Phantom Star, you can discard your hand and draw 7 cards. So you could have Zooming Draw and Phantom Star, do all this at the same time, discard your hand, draw 7, and then Zooming Draw, go up to 8, so on and so forth. Set up multiple Dodrios, get damage counters in play, and it gives you another attacker for a single energy that won't be nerfed. Coming in at the number 3 spot is Alakazam EX, 310 HP on the Psychic type Pokemon with 2 attacks, Mind Jack, 90 plus 30 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So they have a full bench, you're doing 150 more, you're hitting for 240 for 2 colorless. Not the worst thing ever. 220 with a DTE, kind of knocks out a lot of basic EXs and Vs. I really like that a lot. But what really makes Alakazam really cool is Dimensional Hand for 2 Psychic. It does 120, and this attack can be used even when this Pokemon is on the bench. So this is where Alakazam is super cool and interesting, and you have all these access points to all these cool Pokemon that you can have in your active spot. Of course, we've got Klefki with Mischievous Lock. If it's in the active spot, basic Pokemon in play have no abilities, so that's going to turn off things like Comfey and all these other cards needed to establish things like Lost Zone. It also stops Miraidon EX from setting up and using Tandem Unit. In addition to Klefki, we've got Mimikyu when it's in the active spot, or just technically anywhere. Prevent all damage on this Pokemon from Pokemon EX and V. So all the big Roblox Pokemon just can't hit through Mimikyu unless they have some sort of shred attack. So it's a good way to protect your Alakazam and hide behind a Mimikyu. In addition, we have the water route. We have Palkia with the ability Absolute Space from Celebrations. If it's in the active spot, your opponent can't play stadium cards from their hand. So you can leave Palkia in the active, smack down a path to the peak, and what are they going to do? They can't play stadium cards, they can't bump it, so the only deck really playing anything that can bump a stadium that isn't a stadium is Gardevoir, and it's playing Worker. So I think Palkia is really cool in that regard. You probably don't ever really attack with any of these other Pokemon, especially since you just want to attack with Alakazam and use Dimensional Hand for 120 and 120 and 120 and 120 and just build up over time. Final one I want to talk about is Empoleon V, and it's in the active spot. Your opponent's basic Pokemon have no abilities except those with Robloxes. I think Klefki's a little bit better, but I could definitely see like the water synergy between the Palkia and the Empoleon just while you set up as well, depending on what circumstances you want. I think Alakazam has a lot of potential as more cards in the future will come out that'll have abilities when they're in the active spot. There's definitely probably something I've missed, and if I've missed something awesome, let me know down below in the comments. But Alakazam, it's the first time we've had an Alakazam card that was in the Radiant in forever, a full evolution line. It'll be the first time we've had a Kadabra in over 20 years. So I'm super excited to see the potential that Alakazam has in the meta going forward. Coming in at number 2 is Zapdos EX, 200 HP with the ability Bolt Float. If it has any lightning energy attached to it, it has no retreat cost. But what really pops this card off, for 3 lightning, you have multi-shot lightning. It does 120 damage, and it does 90 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage counters on it. And this card is going to shine in Miraidon EX. Of course, we've seen Miraidon have a lot of success recently. It just won a Champions League in Yokohama. It got second place courtesy of Jesse Parker at the Pittsburgh Regional Championships. And I think Miraidon is a deck a lot of people are going to pick up. 1, because it's cost effective. 2, it's powerful. And 3, it's easy to play, and it doesn't really go to time and tie games. So I definitely see this Zapdos pulling in a lot of work. Miraidon, Raikou, sometimes they fall short of taking KOs into opposing, stage 1 or stage 2 EXs or V-Stars, depending on type coverage. And Zapdos can clean up. So you can swing with Miraidon, and then, okay, you needed to hit 280. You couldn't quite get there with whatever other modifiers. You couldn't quite set up Raichu in time. You can get Zapdos charged up with like Dynamotor or your electric generators, and you can clean up a KO and feel really good about that extra 90 going somewhere else. You can pivot around and set up another KO. I really like this Zapdos card a lot. I definitely think it's going to be a must include in almost every Miraidon deck that isn't like jamming Path to the Peak down. I think this card is definitely deserving of the number 2 spot. You can argue with me if you want, but I definitely think this is one of the better cards that's going to make a significant impact on the meta over other cards in 151. And of course, in number 1, we have Mew EX. This thing is insane, and I'm super excited to see where this ends up. Just looking at results from Japan, it's been in most of the top cut decks from that Champions League, and just this thing is insane. So we have 180 HP with no retreat, free retreat on this thing, and the ability Restart. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 3 in your hand. This is very similar to Instruct from Oranguru, which was really popular in the Sun and Moon era when it was legal for play. So I definitely think Mew EX is going to be played, even if just for the ability, but its attack, Genome Hacking for 3 colorless. Choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. So say, for example, you're playing against Rapid Strike. They've got Urshifu in the active spot. You can now G-Max Rapid Flow your opponent and hit 120 and 120 wherever you want. You can copy Giratina V-Star's V-Star power. If you don't have a V-Star power that you have to use for yourself, you can copy Star Requiem and take the instant KO. You can copy almost anything as long as it's in the active spot. And there's so many that are going to make so much more sense than others. And this is a really cool card. And I see this in 4 places easily, but maybe more if I miss them. Any deck that has Baxcalibur with its ability Super Cold to let you play as many water energy as you want from your hand during your turn. We can see this in Chien-Pao. We can see this in Palkia. We have Flaffy in the Miraidon deck with Dynamotor, so you can, Dynamotor to the Mew, turn attach, maybe double Dynamotor if you have them both set up, and then bring up the Mew and come in and swing hard there. We also have Lugia V-Star, colorless Lugia specifically, which has seen success in Yokohama, that Champions League, and Mew is a must include in most of those decks. So you can just use Archeops' Primal Turbo to load up Mew and then, say, slap a Jet Energy on it from the bench, move it up to the active, and then use Genome Hacking to copy whatever attack you need in whatever instance. really strong. And of course, you can also use it in Gardevoir EX because Psychic Embrace will attach energy to Mew in exchange for putting a couple damage counters on it, really setting up things. And of course, in a Gardevoir mirror, if your opponent has Radiant Greninja in play and they don't have Manaphy, you could just boss up that Greninja and use Geno Happing to copy Moonlight Shuriken, knock out their opposing Curlias or Gardevoirs. And just this card is super good. It's super strong. I think it's really powerful, and this is definitely super deserving of the #1 spot in 151. I think it'll be pretty easy to get because the Ultra Premium Collection is going to include the full art gold copy and the alternate art with like the sunset in the background. So if you don't get one super early on in cracking your 151, don't sweat it. I think these cards will be super available for everybody thanks to that Ultra Premium Collection that comes out a few weeks later. Big thank you to everyone who made it this far and watched the whole video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments if there's a card from 151 that I didn't talk about that you want to know more about, if there's going to be deck profiles you want to see covered once I get my hands on the cards. I definitely will be doing some unboxings and openings as soon as I get my hands on some stuff next week, so keep an eye out for some videos, maybe some live streams over on Twitch. Just depends on what's going on, and I'll do my best to provide more content over time. Been really busy with work. We had regionals last week and I bombed out, but maybe we'll put the Charizard deck profile that I played. We got a shout out from Wancho, Primetime Wizard, on the stream during the opening ceremony for Pittsburgh. So really stoked about that kind of stuff. But let me know what you think of this video. Of course, I'll see y'all next time. Much love and peace out.